Joined now by at the Lance Taylor, 94.5 Jocks down in Birmingham. Appreciate him getting up early with us. LT got a lot to dive into, but let's start with the NCAA tournament that is coming up Saturday and Sunday. You live down in Birmingham. Alabama basketball, not awful, right, historically, but also not usually a national title contender. How would you compare the excitement level for an Alabama or Auburn potential Final Four run with a regular college football weekend where you live? How much madness does this spawn in your town?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy, Clay, believe it or not. 2 years ago when Bruce Pearl took Auburn to the Final Four, that was kind of out of nowhere. That team was playing really good down the stretch. They survived New Mexico State, kind of a crazy finish in that first round. And then what they had to endure, knocking off Kansas and North Carolina and Kentucky en route to playing Virginia in the national semifinals, and really a bad call, a travel late. Auburn should have won that game and taken on Texas Tech on that Monday night.
And the tough call in the end zone on that, I said end zone, but they were playing in an arena, I think a football stadium, but in the on the baseline, remember the run-into situation, which was a tough call. I think it was a right call. It was a tough call.
These are, obviously football is first. It's the alpha, no doubt. But I remember just a couple of years ago, we did a poll question, and this was more so for Alabama fans because, Alabama fans, it seems like every other year. Well, about every other year, Nick Saban's winning a national championship. But there are some diehard Alabama basketball fans. And historically, when you look at the history of the SEC, I think they've got the second most wins in the SEC behind Kentucky. There's obviously a huge gap. It's Kentucky and everyone else, but it's been a pretty good historic basketball program. They've just never been to a Final Four. But we asked the question, as Alabama fans, would you rather have a national championship this year in football or basketball? And overwhelmingly, people said basketball. I was really surprised by that, but I guess a lot of that has to do with Alabama's got, some people say 14, some people say 17, depending on how many national championships you say they've got. Alabama basketball fans have been starved. But with all that said, Clay, they're extremely excited about this team. They struggled against Iona. The final 12 minutes, they clamped down. But, the way they played against Maryland, en route to 96 points, 16 threes, and, just everybody contributed. This is a dangerous team. And now, some shops in Vegas have got them favored to win their region right now to come out of the East. And I think a lot of that has to do with Michigan and Florida State have got to play each other. And Alabama's playing UCLA, an 11 seed. But the excitement's at an all-time high. I know some Alabama fans that went to Indy last week for the second-round games, for the first and second-round game. And now, if they were to get to a Final Four, it would be it'd be insane.
Nate Oates is obviously the Alabama Crimson Tide coach. Year 2, what is his career trajectory like from here? Sometimes you have guys obviously catch lightning in a bottle, they make a run, and then you don't hear from them again for years and years. That's one of the things that's interesting about the NCAA tournament. Is he a guy that's going to sustain dominance in your mind? And if so, how long is he at Alabama?
Well, it's an interesting question because a couple of years ago with the success of Bruce Pearl, when UCLA was opening it up and obviously Mick Cronin got that job and, that was after Bruce Pearl made the Final Four run, I said if UCLA came after Bruce Pearl, he'd be gone. Well, I had to check myself because Auburn was, they were the ones that gave Bruce Pearl another chance. So there's some loyalty there. And then I think Bruce Pearl showed himself, hey, if I can get to a Final Four with Auburn, SEC money is more money than Pac-12 money. Why would I not stay put? And I think the same can be said for Nate Oates. When he took this job from Buffalo, he was coming off 32 wins. And this is a guy that had won back-to-back games in the NCAA tournament. He comes in year one, really average, 16 and 15. There were no expectations. But year 2, to do what he's been able to do and to get this contract extension, Greg Byrne, the athletics director, a guy that's from Arizona, he knows good basketball. And I think they've secured Nate Oates for a long time. They will pay him whatever he wants. Now, if a Michigan State was to come along, he's got some history with that state. I think that would be a possibility for Nate Oates. But he can make as much money as he wants. His buyout right now is $10 million. Nobody's going to pay that. I think he's extremely happy. His family loves Tuscaloosa. And again, I think he thinks he can win a national championship. Right now, I would be shocked because I've never even seen the program in a Final Four. But, Clay, as you watch this tournament, would you be completely floored if Alabama wins a national championship?
I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be floored. Yesterday, we had this discussion on Fox Bet Live, and the question was, if there's a team that is going to win other than Gonzaga, obviously, and also Baylor, who are the two prohibitive favorites at this point, who would you pick? And I picked Alabama. I think that if you look at the bracket, they're probably the third most likely team to win the title if I had to pick right now. I don't think that's crazy at all. And I would have never anticipated that coming into the season. And I think one of those questions that kind of hangs out there, LT, is sometimes it's easier to make a run like this when the expectations are low. And then once people start to recognize, hey, you're the guy who's going to be in the mix every single year, there starts to be a little bit more of a pressure situation on you, for lack of a better way of putting it. But right now, I think Alabama's a good value at 11-1, but I'm looking at the FanDuel odds. The Zags and Baylor are 1 and 2, no surprise there. Michigan's still the third most likely. Loyola of Chicago out of nowhere, and then Houston is 9-1. Obviously, that's a function of the bracket they are in, as much as everything else. But Alabama sitting there at 11-1, the sixth most likely team to win the title according to FanDuel.
Yeah, look, again, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they get to a Final Four. I think they beat UCLA, and then I think ultimately I kind of lean Florida State. Again, if Isaiah Livers was playing for Michigan, it would be a much different situation. But Florida State is just so long, and they throw so many bodies at you. But that's the thing about Alabama. You make an argument. It's one of the top 2 or 3 defenses left in this tournament. It might have the best bench left in this tournament. And when they're hitting their threes, it's just such a dangerous team. So, it's going to be interesting. Again, I kind of lean Florida State's going to come out of the East. But, it's kind of a crapshoot right now.
We have our own bracket on Outkick right now. I'll come back to the Sweet 16 and get some gambling picks from you in a moment. But we talked about this yesterday on the show. And in the second hour of the show, so next hour, we're going to have Joe Kinsey on, who came up with the Outkick Sweet 16 woke bracket. We are advancing into the Elite Eight now of the woke bracket. How would you break down the contenders? What did you think of the overall seeding from Joe Kinsey?
I think it's incredible. I really didn't know much about it. I saw you tweet something out. I think it was on, I get every day mixed up now. I think it was on Wednesday. And then on Thursday morning when I was driving in, I heard the beginning of your show, so I got to hear I think it was the toxic masculinity region and then maybe the non-binary region.
Yes.
There are a couple. Look, most of these people I'm just not a fan of. I've just got to be completely honest. But there are some people in your bracket that I still like and respect and enjoy their work. I think it is complete comedy. I want to ask you this, though, because when I started to look at where the results are right now on the woke bracket, I remember we had this conversation years ago, and you were in for SEC Media Days, and we all, as we used to do, we would go to dinner, and we'd have a great group of people. I really miss the SEC Media Days, what they once were, and hopefully we can get that back.
They're back, by the way, in Birmingham this summer, right?
Yeah, well, let's try to do it up like we used to. But anyway, we're sitting in the back room of this steakhouse, and we're having this conversation, and 2 of my co-hosts are there. And they're totally convinced that Bryant-Denny Stadium, because you try to make the argument, hey, look, trust me, people hide behind these Twitter handles, and these people really don't hate me. If you went to Bryant-Denny on a given Saturday afternoon, and of the 100,000-plus fans, about, I don't know what the number was, but it was an extreme number. 85% of these fans would love me and would want to shake my hand and hang out and stuff. And, at that point, I was kind of indifferent. My co-host and a couple of people there, they disagreed with you. The more I've seen this play out over the years, I tend to agree with you. I think there are people that do hide behind a lot of these.
Just put it this way. You and I have been out over the years. We've known each other. I came onto your show like 15 years ago the first time, right?
I've never seen a situation. I brought this up on the air a couple of weeks ago. I said I've never been with Clay and had an encounter, not one time where somebody came up and said something negative.
Right.
And you would typically think that you would at least get that one time, and we've probably been out 50 times.
Yeah.
So my question to you was going to be, with all that said, of these 16 participants, how many of these people in the media in this woke bracket cannot stand you? Because I know a few. I know Darren Ravel cannot stand you.
Yeah, he's got.
I know
blocked
Peter
now
King cannot
on Twitter.
stand you.
First of all, the first response is I don't care, right? And you
I
know
know
me
you
well
don't.
enough to know that also I don't care. How many of the 16 people that we have in the woke bracket hate me? I probably
Well,
16 for 16.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think now. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody on this list. And I didn't make the list or seed them, by the way. This was Joe Kinsey and the writers at Outkick. But I think we go 16 for 16.
I think it's close. You know, you might have a couple like a Maria Taylor. I've had an opportunity to meet her. She seems extremely nice. She might just have a forgiving heart, and she doesn't really care that she's in the woke bracket. But I think the majority of these people in the woke bracket cannot stand Clay Travis.
But here's the thing I would say, and you know me well enough this too. I would be fine going out and having drinks with any of the people in the woke bracket, right? Like, or going out for dinner or whatever. It's not like I don't hate these people. I mean, I think they say ridiculous things, but it's not like I would run away from them.
Yeah, Petros Papadakis was on our show, and you know Petros really well as any of us. And, you know, he said, you know, the thing, and you came up because I was asking him about the time that you guys had to share a dressing room at Fox. And he said, the thing I love about Clay is nothing can rattle him. It doesn't matter if somebody is saying things directly to him. It doesn't shake him at all. So, yeah, I truly believe that guys like Peter King can foam at the mouth on their opinions, and you just won't lose your cool, and you would absolutely go to dinner with these guys. I don't think they would return the favor. But anyway, Peter King,
I think I'm old school. I'm sorry to cut you off. I think I'm old school in that respect. Like, I understand that people might disagree with me or even personally dislike me, but that doesn't really impact me, right? Like, back in the day, I think I would have been a good politician in D.C., because they used to go out and argue about who was right on an issue, but then at the end of the day, they would go out and have a steak and have dinner together. Whether you were a Democrat or Republican, you could kind of get along, right? You would fight all day. And I think that still happens to a certain extent in sports, right? Where all these coaches, like college basketball coaches, are a great example right now where we got March Madness going on. I think all these coaches fight all day for recruits. They battle. They're hyper competitive. They're committed to what they're trying to do. But at the end of the day, you know, they could go out and have a beer together. And I think most of them would probably get along pretty well, even in the hyper competitive realm of coaching. Now, doesn't mean that some of them don't hate the others, but I'm not the kind of guy who really genuinely hates somebody because they have a different opinion than me. It just doesn't really. I mean, I'll argue with them and I'll point out why I think they're idiots on some of their positions, but they can do the same for me, and it doesn't really rattle me.
Well, yeah, and I think some of these in the woke bracket, based on positions that they've taken over the last year, and your ability to call them out, I think it has rattled them to the core. Yeah. And I think in a lot of cases, it's embarrassed a lot of these huge egos. And therefore, you'll never be able to get that steak and beer. And like you said earlier, I believe you really don't care.
And it may screw up your ability to go out at SEC Media Days, because some people might be like, well, is Clay going to be there? Because if Clay's going to be there, I can't go.
Yeah.
Which is actually really kind of funny to me.
And that's fine. You know, there are some people that you know, I like the thick skin type, though, because you and Klatt have a nice back and forth. Yes. Klatt gets pissed off, and he doesn't agree with a lot of things you say.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Klatt's just going to be, you know, Joel Klatt's one of those guys that, hey, look, Clay's got his opinion. Clay is Clay. He's going to say what he wants. But I would find it hard to believe that Mike Florio or Keith Olbermann is ever going to do a shot with you at a bar.
Which is a shame, by the way, because I've also said this. Well, first of all, those guys don't do shots. Like, let's be honest. They would choke trying to throw a shot back. But I have said for a long time, I welcome, like, all those people, everybody in the woke bracket, if they wanted to come on my show, I would allow them to come on my show, right? Like, I don't run and hide from my positions or my opinions. Those guys, I mean, give credit to Peter King, but I think all the woke crew heard what happened when Peter King came on this radio program. And, I mean, it was basically like, he got guillotined. I mean, and it wasn't like me being a jerk to him. It was just like, okay, you said X. Well, let's talk about, you defend X. And, I mean, what you find is so many of these woke people, and this is my position in general. I may have to bring you back for another segment, by the way. But my position is most of them have, like, 20-foot tall opinions that are an inch deep. And so what I mean by that is it's all very performative, right? And I'll just give you an example. I don't believe there is anyone who is a true fan of sports that truly believes that men who decide to become women should be competing in women's sports, right? Like, I don't think there is a single sports writer in America, male or female, that actually believes that if you are a grown man, let's pretend that Bruce Jenner had decided to switch his gender the Olympics after he won the decathlon, right? I don't think there's a single person out there that would be like, oh, Bruce Jenner was just the male decathlon gold medal winner or whatever the heck he was, and now he is switching his gender to female. I genuinely don't believe there's a single person covering sports writing who would say Caitlyn Jenner should be able to compete as a woman in the next Olympics. Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever you are, sports writers in general, male and female, I don't think there's a single one of them that actually believe that. But I bet there is a huge percentage of the woke crew that would argue in favor of that publicly. And if you sat down and had a beer with them, they'd be like, yeah, that's total BS.